Northern Missouri, just south of the Iowa border, in a town called Bethany. It's a really small town, very rural. I grew up there. I went to college in UCM in Warrensburg, and that's there where I first worked on political campaigns on the 2012 Missouri Coordinated Campaign. From there, I moved over here to Columbia, and then I went back and forth from here in the East Coast, working on campaigns, Christine Quinn's campaign in New York City, and a couple of different campaigns in Norwalk as well, just helping to build grassroots community movements. So I grew up, the town I grew up in, it actually only had about 3,000 people. And there I really learned kind of a sense of how a community can be very independent and work together to solve their own problems, but then also, to a large extent, how we simply need sometimes some help from the rest of the country as well, to help build our infrastructure, help our schools out. So, aside from working 100 or more hours a week every single day, aside from the heavy levels of stress, because if you don't meet your goals, you simply can't win an election, aside from all that stress, I think it's really important, and something I definitely learned from it, was being able to talk to all these different people from all walks of life. Because in an election, the people that come to help you out, or even the people who are totally against you and come to tell you that as well, they could be farmers, they could be union guys, they could be working at a tech company. They come from all walks of life. And being an organizer really helped me learn to be able to relate to all those people, see things from their perspective, and I think, better come to as kind of an understanding between all the groups, form good solutions based on that, based on an entire diverse. Vicki Hartzler in particular, just to be honest, was in 2010. I was at a town hall meeting. I was at a town hall meeting with a friend of mine that she was at. We figured we'd go and see her speak. And she'd been talking about how we need to cut down the line. Everybody was in 2010. It was real fashionable to say that we should just get rid of the government. And my friend, he asked her, well, Vicki, you're saying you want to cut all down the line, but over a third of the district, and in most counties much more than that, get reduced or free school lunches for their children. And if you're doing all of this cutting, what about those kids? And it might have caught her a little off guard, but what she said was, I think everybody should lift themselves up by their own bootstraps. To me, that seems a little bit unreasonable as they're 7 years old. So that's kind of what got me a little bit interested in her as a politician. But I got here really after working on the coordinated campaign in 2012 and watching the race with Hensley, and I had very high hopes with that because Teresa's a wonderful woman. After that, everybody got a little bit scared. I mean, the whole district seemed to take a little bit of a step to the right. Things got a little bit tougher, but when I was coming back from Connecticut, the day before I came back, my grandfather, who was 92, passed away. He was very much to me like the symbol of America, like just my hero. Worked all his life. He was orphaned when he was a kid, rode his bike 100 miles with his little brother to go to his nearest family, worked in the fields, much like the greatest generation. That was relatively common. People worked in the fields every day. And, he worked all his life just to make sure that his kids could go to college, that they could have a better life, that they wouldn't have to go through what he went through. He never once asked for help on anything. We had to convince him that he could take Social Security. He thought it was insane that someone would give him money when he didn't need it. He never asked for anything, but at the same time, he understood that sometimes people needed a hand up, They just needed a hand up, and he would always help out his friends in need. Never complained about taxes, never complained about anything. 92 years old, been a Republican all his life, and over the last decade, switched to being a Democrat. So when he passed away, I thought about that whole generation just as it is fading out now. And I thought about my own generation and how, we have a very different outlook. Golden ticket, we should go to college, and it would absolutely pay out. So now we're all up to our neck in debt, 1.2 trillion overall. And so we have an outlook that's more like the greatest generation, where it's not that perfect scenario that, say, maybe the Cold War, us and them, we're good, they're bad, or the post-Cold War euphoria where America's invincible. We see America as a great country, the greatest country in ideals and principles, but we also see that we face real problems as a country and as a world, and we should have real solutions to them. It makes us more pragmatic. So I thought about that generation, and when he passed away, I thought, well, if no one's going to sign up, and at the time no one had, if no one's going to sign up to stand up for an America that is, once again, more moderate, more pragmatic, more able to actually get things done rather than just have one-size-fits-all ideological policies. If no one else is going to stand up and say, hey, this is crazy, we need to stop, if no one else will, then I will. And then that's how I ended up here. Smarter government's a couple things. First of all, pardon me, it's a government without ideology. Without ideology. I mean, pragmatism, I know I say this word a lot, but it's so important, like that, just willingness to do whatever it takes, no matter whose idea it is, no matter whose idea it is. If it's a good idea, it's the idea we do. As of late, over the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years, especially, like, the right has gone further here, the left's gone further here, and there's much less willingness to compromise. And to be honest, it makes sense from, I guess, from their perspective, because they can just get their base to go out and vote. They get them angry, get them scared, and they get them to go vote because they say, oh, this is the 100% answer. But nothing's black and white. So a smarter government, for one, is a government that's willing to look at the problems and find real solutions. And even if it's the other side's, because don't forget the Affordable Care Act was actually a Cato Institute idea originally. Even if it's the other side's idea, if it's good for the people, it's what we ought to work towards and work to do. So that's part of it. On another front, our generation is extremely, just immersed in technology, obviously. I didn't actually have a cell phone until I was like 19. I didn't have the internet. I remember the first time somebody said, this is the internet, and I was like, wow. And then 5 minutes later, a web page came up. But, we are just absolutely immersed in technology, and there are so many things that we can do right now to cut government spending by making it more efficient through technology. We don't have to just cut down the line. We can be smart about it. We don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We can be smart about it, and we can look at the things, where can we have more efficiency? A smarter government looks at all these programs, finds redundancies, and then merges them together to be under one roof, because that's cheaper. That's easier, it's more efficient, and it provides better customer service. So that's kind of what a smarter government is to me. I'll tell you, I have a friend, David Caldwell. He'd actually come and stayed in Columbia with us. He just sort of showed up. He's an older gentleman. He's about 70. He came and he wanted to help out, showed up, stayed with us for 2 days, just out on the street, just campaigning for me. I love him. He's a great man and a good friend, But David is in kind of a funny situation. You see, his wife, she's ill. She has Alzheimer's, and she needs constant care. And he's never been a rich man. Most of my friends haven't. But he can't really do a whole lot to make more money than he does. Otherwise, she'll lose her care. And he can't really get care himself because of that. And he had a heart attack on the 4th of July. On the 4th of July. Fell down on his porch. Luckily, a gentleman happened to come over to his house and found him there, passed out. Now, he called me on the 5th of July, told me all about it. He was so optimistic. Like, he said, well, they got me on the helicopter. I got to see the fireworks going off. He was taking it very well. But one thing about it, he said, if they just had expanded Medicaid, I would have had coverage. I wouldn't have got to this point because I knew there was a problem for a long time, but I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't get that help I need. And if I did do something to help myself, then I could lose that care for my wife, and I'm not going to do that. So I think absolutely every state needs to expand Medicaid. Missouri needs to. If we don't, by 2016, 5.7 million people that could be covered won't be. And that's a tragedy. And that it hurts people. Like, you walk by somebody on the street, you may never think anything of it. Probably nobody would ever think about David Caldwell needing that help. But the fact is, millions of Americans do. And if we don't act now, people will suffer. And that's it. It's a no-brainer. One way we can do that is by raising the minimum wage to 10.10. It is true that in some parts of the country, it could lower employment. Maybe on the East Coast, there would be some employment loss in the short term. In Missouri, however, it's estimated that it will create 3,000 new jobs. But it's not even just that, if you think about it. It's what comes in the long term. Because it's a question of how much people save. The only people that should be really against it, that are really against it, are people like Walmart, who refuse to raise wages, who won't let their workers organize. The giant corporations that control so much of the country today are the ones that really stand against it, because all they care about is the bottom line. And I'm sorry, but I kind of think that I'm a little bit tired of people being buried in the balance sheet. So that's one way. Another way we can do that is increased access to education. Now, by that, I don't just mean college. Anyone who wants to go to college, I think, should be able to. This is the 21st century. We need to ramp up education, and everybody who wants to should be able to. However, I don't think that we need to push people to go to college instead of, say, a trade school. I think we can expand access to trade education by having centers, much like we do now, that have training centers, but then have rural satellites that are partnered with, say, nonprofit groups, churches. When you don't have a job, trying to drive 45, 50 miles to the nearest area to get that training and do that several times a week, you simply cannot afford it. You know, especially if gas prices are shooting through the roof all the time, they cannot afford it. So we have to be able to get that to them. And I think that that's an excellent way. We need to invest in advanced manufacturing. We need to heavily invest in it, and we need to be able to train these folks to be able to have those jobs when they come. Because if you think about it, Japan, South Korea, Germany, they're so far ahead of us on advanced manufacturing that it becomes eventually frightening. Like, will America completely fall behind? Sadly, a lot of the jobs have gone overseas. In the past, the easy low-tech manufacturing that you could take to, say, China and have pretty much slave labor do it, sadly, a lot of those probably won't come back. I wish that they would, but they probably won't. So what we need to do now is look towards the future, say what is the next thing, and invest heavily in that and get those jobs here where they will stay. Moon, it's ridiculous the stuff that they think that they'll be able to do. So that's one. And then the second really is just smart materials in general, which they already have some now. For instance, manufacturing of materials in Iraq, they had the trucks. They had a problem with shooting holes in the gas tanks, right? So a company created a material that when a bullet shoots it, it automatically fills itself in. It's like a foam. Manufacturing stuff like that isn't as easy. It takes science. It takes real technology. It takes trained workers. Those are the next big things. Eventually, we'll get to a point where having, say, houses that can create their own energy in some way. That's where it'll go. It's a little bit down the line. Right now, we can do it with, computers, solar panels, anything like that. And sadly, China is getting way ahead of us on. But we can do it with green energy technologies, biotechnologies right now. But in the future, especially, it's just going to really take off. So, well, Amendment 1, the quote-unquote right to farm, which you could probably call it right to harm just as well, amendment, says, and it seems very harmless. Admittedly, it seems extremely harmless. It's a constitutional amendment. It says we will protect the right for people to farm in Missouri. And it seems very harmless, but the problem is, I have no problem with people farming, none at all. My uncle's a farmer, my grandfather's a farmer. On my mom's side, the whole down the line, were farmers and preachers. But the thing about it is it's so vague that it can be easily abused. So we could have corporations from out of state, even out of the country, coming in and buying up our land in large quantities and driving small family farms out. Mm-hmm. And I don't like that. Smithfield Farms, the Chinese had bought that. Why did they buy that? I don't know if you knew this or not. The Chinese actually have a strategic pork reserve. Kind of like we have a strategic oil reserve, they have a strategic pork reserve, which in some ways, because I think piglets are adorable, I think that would be about the cutest reserve in the world. But they consume massive amounts of pork. The problem with that is it takes a whole lot of water, and it causes a decent amount of pollution the way they've done it. We do it a lot better. We can always improve, but they pretty much just mass produce, don't even worry about it. But it takes a lot of water. So what do they want to do? They want to buy up pork farms here. They want to buy up as many as they can and gain control of them so they can use our water, so they can pollute our soil, so they can use it to the point of just being worthless. I don't think that's right. Especially when you think about 2050, there's going to be water shortages several places in the globe. I don't think that we should allow other countries to come in, buy up our land, drive out our family farms, and then use up our resources. I'm just not for it. On the other side of that, just in general, corporations buying up land to drive out family farms, I think is extremely harmful. Mm-hmm. The agriculture industry at some point, because it really is, agriculture is the backbone of any country. Food sovereignty, food security is extremely important. But at some point, we're going to have to reevaluate. Mm-hmm. Because between Monsanto and DuPont, they control 55% of the world's seed market. That's 55% of the world's seed market. That is kind of dangerous at the end of the day, especially since they're now trying to engineer seedless plants. So you have to buy those seeds over and over and over again. Now, I don't want to sound too radical or too much like a conspiracy guy, But the fact remains that when we're creating these plants, they can't reproduce. We become entirely dependent on a very small amount of people, in this case pretty much two, to be able to buy what we need to survive. And I think that that's dangerous. I think it needs to stop. Now, any investment they do into GMOs, sure, they can patent it, but at some point we're going to have to stop going so crazy with the patent, because they're basically trying to patent up everything God created, and it's driving up prices and taking everything from the rest of us. So the biggest problem from the governmental regulation side of things, because I think that there are some regulations we can cut, but it's not even necessarily cutting regulations. Is we need to better enforce what we do have, because unfortunately with the defunding of most regulatory agencies, it becomes a huge problem, hence the oil spill in the Gulf. But the real problem there is with small businesses is whenever you create a regulation, it applies universally down the board for the biggest corporations in the country and the smallest little business in the country. The small businesses cannot compete. Medium-sized businesses cannot compete. And oftentimes, large corporations or extremely aggressive mid-sized ones looking to grow will push for these regulations that will then basically create too much cost for the small business and drive them out, and they can buy them up. Happened to gas stations in the 90s when they changed regulation on the levels of gas in the underground tanks. Whenever everybody had to change their tanks, most of the small places couldn't afford it. I had several family businesses in my hometown that I would go to every day closed because of it, and that's too bad and that's sad. What I think we should probably do is just be a little bit more reasonable, and instead of applying them straight down the board, have regulations that apply to A and regulations that apply to B, create better exemptions, more exemptions for small businesses. That doesn't mean they should get a free pass to say. So I think that probably a part of it, and this is a very big thing that maybe just people kind of overlook when they're writing legislation, is you have to look at every little piece. You have to look at the spurring out of effects, because sure, if we do this, there will be some maybe a greater level of safety. But we can't just run around ruining people's lives doing it in the meantime. We have to be smarter about it. So there's that. Another thing right now that's impeding small businesses is this whole idea of austerity being in any way an effective measure. What we need to do right now, not only to help small businesses in the short term, but in the long term, is to invest heavily in infrastructure. And beyond that, invest heavily in, say, renewable energy, or beyond that, invest heavily in the electric car. All of those things are really important, but right now, right here, right now, it's extremely important to invest in infrastructure, especially in small towns where, most of the roads going out, they're just bad. There could be excellent tourism. People from the city often love to go to small towns, love to visit them, love to see them, bed and breakfast, whatever, and that could increase a lot. But if we don't have roads that are safe, if we don't have bridges that anyone wants to cross, then no one's going to come. So this idea of cut straight down the line and don't worry about it, all we need to do is just slash and burn the budget, it's really hurting small business, especially in small towns. That and just the SBA exists to give loans to new small businesses, to spur job growth. And strapping down on them, like hampering them down, saying you can't spend as much, that's also bad. So I mean, personally, I feel nothing wrong with the government giving a loan to a small business that's going to create jobs. It's a good idea. That could even massively change the economy. That could be the next Facebook. I see nothing wrong with that. So there's that. I've done a number of things. It is white and has a sort of purple hood. I like to think it looks like Iron Man. I'm going to guess I'm probably wrong. And we had sent out an email to a bunch of supporters asking for help on naming. We'd gotten a lot of different names. One gentleman actually proposed the name Deer Slayer, which at the time I was like, because he thought that I had hit a deer and that's why it's a different hood. That wasn't actually the case. But what happened just a couple weeks ago is a deer actually jumped up through my window. The deer actually got away okay. My car didn't get away quite so well.
Oh, no.
It was in the shop for a while, but it's fine. It's just got a few more dents on it than it did before. But there's that, but then a few people, and we talked about earlier, Two-Tone Tony, that's been suggested more than any other, and I think that just in the name of democracy has won the name of the car. So
All right, great. So,
So they can sign up on irvinforcongress.com. They could message us on Facebook, though we have not done a whole lot with social media yet. We're waiting for their friends. Just the beauty of exponential mathematics is that we could actually just run out of people very quickly if everybody does. It's okay. I understand that completely. But do find your friends. Do mark them as supporters. Do let us know. And when it comes time to vote, we can actually turn those people out. Democrats, sadly, don't vote as much as Republicans. And hopefully a lot of Republicans vote for me. I think that they will. But sadly, we exist to expand opportunity for the people. We exist to do what we can to make your life better. That doesn't mean give you a handout. That means give you a hand up when you need it and help you do even better, right? If you want that kind of government, then vote for me and vote in a midterm. Or, if on the flip side of that, if you don't like my ideas, and that's fine, because if the majority of people don't like my ideas, then I would be glad not to be the representative, because it would be wrong. Because the representative needs to be, A, what the people want, and also be able to listen to them and go with what they want rather than just what they personally believe. But if you happen to be against my ideas, that's fine. Vote for them, vote in the midterm. But no matter what you do, vote in the midterm, because